Welcome to Givers, Doers, and Thinkers. Today we talk to longtime National Review publisher Jack Fowler about the place of magazines of ideas in civil society, about fundraising for periodicals, and about how to manage those pesky creative types. Let's go. Givers, Doers, and Thinkers introduces listeners to the fascinating people and important ideas at the heart of American civil society. We speak with philanthropists, nonprofit leaders, social entrepreneurs, historians, journalists, and anyone else who will help us understand contemporary civil society's achievements and failures. We also sprinkle in practical advice for nonprofit leaders and fundraisers. My name is Jeremy Beer, and thanks for joining us. All right, thank you for joining us for another episode of Givers, Doers, and Thinkers. Today, I am pleased to speak with my friend Jack Fowler, who for over 3 decades served at National Review, 12 of those years as its publisher. National Review, as surely many of you know, was founded by William F. Buckley in 1955, I believe, to, quote, stand athwart history yelling stop. And while history was not stopped by Buckley and crew, it was certainly redirected. Jack co-hosts the Victor Davis Hanson Show podcast with, naturally enough, Victor Davis Hanson as his co-host. And while National Review was and is a for-profit institution, Jack is no stranger to the world of philanthropy and fundraising. Besides raising money for NR, and we'll talk about that, he has served on many boards, including those of the American Mental Health Foundation, the Human Life Foundation, the Frontier Center, and Gen Justice. And for over a decade, he was a White House Fellows Program regional judge. I have no idea what the White House Fellows Program is, but perhaps we'll find out. Welcome, Jack.
Jeremy, I'm really happy to be here talking to you, old friend. Thanks for having me on.
And now, since you are a real podcast host and I am a fake podcast host, you can step in at any moment to give me pointers and tips, correct diction, whatever it is you need to do.
Okay.
I'll appreciate it all, I assure you. So let's start here. Let's start with National Review and your background there. I think that will be of interest to many listeners. First of all, many of them not know what National Review is. So can you give sort of the background of the magazine and
Yeah, National Review was a magazine. It's now a magazine and a website. It was founded, as you mentioned, by Bill Buckley in 1955, and it was critical to the formation of the conservative movement, political and cultural movement. If you go back 65 years, there was a little publication called Human Events, but not much else out there. In fact, a respectable magazine, nothing at all that anyone would consider conservative. There was a vacuum, and Bill Buckley, young, 30-year-old, already sort of a little bit well-known. He had written God and Man at Yale, which was a very controversial book. He had written a book with his brother-in-law about Joseph McCarthy. So he creates National Review, and National Review becomes the Bible of the conservative movement and kind of the rallying flag for conservatism, especially political conservatism. It was because of National Review that a Goldwater movement, draft Goldwater movement, was created. So within less than a decade, this little journal of 50,000 subscribers had become a tremendous force in American life. And Bill Buckley himself became a truly significant force above and beyond the magazine.
A type of conservative intellectual that we maybe don't see so much anymore. Someone who had his own television show with Firing Line. That was, I think it was a PBS show, correct? And
Correct.
An urbanity. He was well-bred. This was a pre-populist conservatism in a lot of ways. Yeah, in other ways, the issues of the time certainly align with certain populist, I guess you'd say, concerns like anti-communism, which was not a huge concern of intellectual elites in the mid-50s, but certainly was in the heartland, sometimes playing out in bizarre fashion, as was the case to some extent with Senator Joe McCarthy, let us say.
Right.
And there was a John Birch Society that Buckley played a big role in marginalizing in American public life, I think. What was civil society, our theme here on this podcast, sort of that voluntary sector, the intermediate sector between the state and the individual. Was that a thematic concern of National Review in the early days, or does that only emerge later?
Well, that implies it emerged at all, but
at all, right? It does, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think yes. Certainly, Russell Kirk was a writer for National Review and an editor from the very beginning, and he had a 25 years of contributions to the magazine. And if you went back to the very first issue, you would see that the themes that mark civil society or the threats to civil society were key to National Review. But like anything else in life, I think current events kind of overwhelmed. Certainly the fight against communism became really the predominant theme of National Review, and then also free advocacy of the free market, and then becoming a political journal, which it increased over the years. And when you're just a magazine, and I don't mean to say belittle it, but you're a thing. It's a thing with limits. It's 48 pages or 62, and there's just so much you can publish. And a magazine is a reflection largely of the editor. And as much as Bill Buckley cared about issues, again, he came to fame publicly by in 1951 writing about God and Man at Yale. So here we are. Conservatism is 70 years ago attacking the academy. What the hell's happened in the meanwhile? Did we drop a ball there? Maybe we did. No, I don't think any maybe about it. But look, civil society is an important part. No, it was a part, but it was overshadowed by other interests of the writers and editors over the years.
Yeah, and that may be indicative of the status of the topic or concern in conservatism more broadly, post-war conservatism more broadly. Talk a little bit about, I would imagine everybody must ask you this question, who is aware of who Bill Buckley was. Maybe they've seen the Buckley versus Gore Vidal documentary that came out a few years ago. Talk about what Buckley was like, your relationship with him, his relationship to the world. What was Bill Buckley like?
Let me back into that by quickly quoting Al Felsenberg, who wrote a terrific biography of Bill a couple of years ago. And Al said that Bill Buckley might have been the most important private citizen in American history, meaning not an elected official, not a general, never elected. And so Bill was...
That's really amazing.
Well, it is, but you look at one man's truly colossal impact on the political culture, at least at one time, is really not only through National Review, but through his TV show Firing Line, which ran for close to 30 years. But so Bill was talking about him at a time when I wasn't even born. I cannot imagine in 1955, and I was born in 1960. I can't imagine anyone else accomplishing what Bill did. And this is by virtue of his character and personality. And I first saw Bill Buckley when I was at Holy Cross. He gave a speech there. But then in 1983, I began to work not for National Review, but at National Review for great man Jim McFadden, who had created the Human Life Review and some Catholic publications. So there I was at NR, and I knew and was friendly with Brookhiser and Joe Sobran. And I can't say I was friends with Bill, but I knew Bill. And then eventually National Review hired me when I'd moved to Washington. So I became his employee. But we did cruises.
Right.
Let me just say this, magazines that are opinion magazines, left or right, have to do things to raise money that are a little beyond consideration. You're not getting by subscription revenue, and I could bore our listeners and explain why that all is.
Yeah, we may get into that a little bit, but it's certainly not the case. It never was the case, even at National Review, and it's certainly not the case today. Yeah,
no, it's just, I mean, if you're owned by a billionaire, that's one thing, but if you're dependent on subscription revenue, you're in trouble. So one of the virtues of these cruises, Bill did attend them, and he saw me in action or interaction with our readers and subscribers, and I guess I had a talent there, and he came to admire that, and he was somewhat fond of me for that, because I love our readers and our donors, and
would Bill interact with them himself?
He did. Oh yeah. You can't hide in your cabin the whole the whole week. You can try.
Surrounding him the whole time on the cruises.
Oh yeah. It was true. But let me again. I'm jump back a little bit. You cannot be a publication as National Review was, and 3 years after National Review was founded, Bill Rusher, who had been the publisher at the time, and Bill was a great man, was publisher for 25 years, and National Review was about to go under. It's a for-profit entity. It had its business plan. It was going to be making money in 2.5 years. Well, guess what? The doors were about to shut. And Bill Rusher told Bill Buckley, our readers are not going to let this happen. Essentially, they see National Review as a cause. And
right.
NR started to write its subscribers, please help. Once you start that engagement, Jeremy, you've created a very different relationship with subscribers than Time Magazine had it with its subscribers. So, there's the quid pro quo, and to some people it comes very naturally. To some people it may come grudgingly or less naturally, but still has to happen. That National Review formed these relationships with its individual readers and supporters. So Bill was very conscious of that. Later on in life, he said he owned National Review, and he did. He owned it until its business model changed. He owned it on behalf of the people, in stewardship of the people who kept the doors on lights, which is true, a true statement. So anyway, interacting with Bill, he was very fond of me. His wife, Pat, the late Pat Buckley, and I got along very well. And there was one little thing here that people who live in New York get this. A lot of people around the country do not. They just shake their head when they realize how far some people travel to get to work every day. And in New York, I say I was in the solar system. I just happened to be on Pluto. And it was 2 hours commuting each way that's 4 hours a day. You can do the math easily. And Bill thought, like, wow, this guy is, he's coming in every day. And he kind of he admired that. But he truly admired my relationship with many of the readers and therefore cruisers who were supporters, and eventually, we consider them also donors, and some of them, as time went on, truly beneficial benefactors to this overall institution.
I only interacted with Buckley on a couple of occasions. One time had somehow cashed an invitation to some party at his apartment. I think it was on Park Avenue. Am I right about that?
Yes. Yeah, Park and 73rd, right?
Right. And it was just wow, this would be really cool. And there are a couple things that I'll always remember. First, he was extremely nice, even to these young kids, like my wife, at that time, maybe my future wife and me, and one or two others from the younger crowd. He was very, very kind. And but I remember his apartment here's two things that might surprise you about Buckley. It was extremely modernist, like 1920s-ish modernist in its decor.
Like French whorehouse theme.
Right. I was like, think fringed lamps,
right.
Which was remarkable. It's shag carpeting. And the other thing was the hors d'oeuvres also were what you would find in sort of it matched the same time period, let's put it that way. It was like a 1920s era hors d'oeuvres. It was like Ritz crackers with peanut butter and celery on them.
Right.
It was curious. I mean, what did that tell us about his personality, or did that reflect Pat's personality?
Well, it was her house. And I don't know if she was at the dinner when you were there, but they were two forces of nature. Some of the dinners were quite remarkable. The back and forth between Mr. and Mrs. Buckley. But the interesting thing you say is, of course, you were there, and you were there as a young man with your then fiance, future wife. But the last meal Bill Buckley ever had of that nature was in early. It was either very early. He died in February of 2008. I think it was 2 months before, and Bill was very ill the last 18 months, but died with his boots on. He was not bedridden, anything like that, but he was determined to have a dinner with the new young writers at National Review. And he did. It was a wonderful, wonderful night. He really loved young, smart people. Didn't matter. You didn't have to be conservative, but if you were smart and articulate, he found that very engaging. Those dinners, towards the end of my when I became the publisher, I was entitled to go to those dinners, and I did. And Bill's company was always a very welcome thing. As you and I were talking before the show a little bit, and I still to this day think, like, what am I doing in the same room with this guy? Like, there's something wrong here. I shouldn't be with Bill Buckley. I feel the same way about his brother, Jim Buckley, who's still alive, great former senator. Like, wow, what an honor to know him, never mind to talk to him.
Yeah, also a throwback, a different, it's just that things have changed so much in the Republican Party among sort of the character of sort of the tonality of conservatism. And yet Jim Buckley comes from that older East Coast patrician type of center-right political orientation. I'm going to put you on the spot, Jim. I just call you Jim because you're talking about Jim Buckley.
I have a brother, Jim. I have a son, Jim.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Jack.
Yes.
Who was the most intellectually, Buckley aside, who was the most intellectually impressive writer that you came in contact with at National Review?
Wow, that is on the spot. I'm going to have to go to Joe's.
I'm going to give people the questions ahead of time.
No, that's fine. I think Joe Sobran. Joe, who is many people might not know, I love Joe. Joe was a very controversial man. He left National Review under very acrimonious, and it had a lot to do with anti-Semitism. Bill right. Buckley had begun an investigation of anti-Semitism on the right, and Joe had his back up, to say the least. He was a senior editor at National Review, but he was a beautiful writer, an unrivaled writer. And you know what? You could be the smartest guy, but if you can't convey your intelligent thoughts, almost what's the point? But Joe could. And if I may, when I was in Washington for National Review, which I was for a few years, I was the congressional reporter, along with my dear friend Bill McGurn, who's now Bill's a columnist at the Wall Street Journal. And Joe used to come to the office. This is before the breakup, and he'd have a column due. Joe had a twice weekly column, and he didn't know what the hell he was going to write about. And he'd have a pile of newspapers, and he'd just open them up. He'd see something. He'd stick the yellow paper in the old Selectric typewriter and bang it out and pull it out, maybe jot in one word, fax it off. And as it was published is how it came out of his head. And it was just remarkable. Joe took on the hypocrisy of leftism regularly. I think he would, if it had not been for God, Joe's passed away. If he was still around, we didn't have to go through this great tumult that he went through, I think he'd be one of the more powerful forces against the leftist assault on Western civilization. But Joe had he did have his hang-ups, and it's kind of a tragedy in a way.
Yes, and he got probably more radicalized after the split with National Review, unfortunately.
Yeah, he did. I'm blessed. I have to say, my wife and I are godparents to one of his children. We're still very much part of the Sobran family. So I think of him. I don't have rose-colored glasses, but I think of him with great love. We are all of us sinners, so me especially.
Well, we'll be right back with Jack Fowler. We'll talk about a little bit more about get into the business of running a magazine and how philanthropy plays into that. We'll be right back. Time for one of our practicalities here, and I'm happy to have with us today my colleague and friend Chris Baggett, Managing Director of Marketing Services and Client Engagement here at American Philanthropic. How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing very well, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to be speaking with you. Chris knows a lot of things. He's really, really good at marketing, and he's really good at scanning the landscape to evaluate what digital tools and platforms out there are worth investing in if you're a nonprofit organization and which ones aren't. And today, Chris, you're going to give us 3 tools, digital tools that nonprofits should invest in, correct?
That's correct.
Let's go. What's your first one?
All right. The first one we have here is called the Hemingway app. And the Hemingway app is a reading level checker. So essentially, you load your copy, whether it's appeal copy you're writing, website copy, and it will grade your copy by grade level. As you know that, most copy converts best if it's around a 7th grade reading level. And so Hemingway app helps you understand what grade level your copy is written at.
We can't talk above a 7th grade level.
That's right.
Explaining what it is we do in our mission. Right? Well, that's a whole other show about why 7th grade is the right level. But regardless, that's where we are as a people.
That's right. That's right. The second one is Google Data Studio. So Google Data Studio is, really it's a data visualization tool, and an important part of evaluating performance really is data visualization. And Google Data Studio enables, a nonprofit organization to input data, and then it outputs charts, graphs that help us understand what performance is looking like.
Any kind of data? Are we just talking about just website data, or could it be, what kind of data are we talking about?
Yeah, any kind of data. It's an open source technology. Yeah, so Fantastic. You can input donor performance, and it'll spit out. Yeah.
I did not know about that. You're actually surprising me with it. I thought you had to kind of go pretty upscale with like a Tableau or something like that. But Google Data Studio, is it free or do you have to pay for that?
Yeah, Google Data Studio is free. In fact, Hemingway app and Google Data Studio are both free tools.
That's cool. Okay, and what's the third one?
The third one is my favorite, and that is HubSpot. HubSpot is an all-in-one marketing automation platform that really enables nonprofits to create personalized donor experiences based upon how donors interact with your content.
How do you use HubSpot? Like I'm aware of it. I know that by the way, we do have, we are a HubSpot, what do we call a partner or something like that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. American Philanthropic is a HubSpot Gold partner.
Okay. So what does that mean? Like what could we, what can we do for you? How would we use HubSpot? What problem would we be solving with HubSpot?
Yeah. So one of the challenges that many nonprofits face is their communication tools and their data tools are disparate. So they're disconnected from one another. So for example, if a user opens an email, that information is, those interactions are stored in the email database, but that may not be connected to their CRM of record. HubSpot gives you the opportunity to not only store email interactions, but website interactions. If you have chat enabled, store chat interactions, really to build deeper level segmentation or communication categories for your audience to engage with them in a way that is meaningful to them.
So Hemingway, to make sure you're speaking at a level that is appropriate, writing and communicating at a level that is appropriate. Google Data Studio to visualize data. Put in anything you want, get it out. That's free. HubSpot, not free. It's my understanding. But
that's correct.
For really being for storing good data on every interaction you have with your constituents, and then being able to modify your communications to them appropriately.
That's exactly right. Very well.
Very good. Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Those are 3 good tools.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's good to be with you, Jeremy.
Okay, we are back with Jack Fowler, former publisher of National Review, where he was on the staff in some capacity or other for more than 3 decades, saw tremendous changes in that time. One of those changes was the birth of National Review Online, which was one of the earliest really successful website of ideas. Is that what we mean?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, Andrew Breitbart took the idea and used it to create. Now I can't think of it. What's her name? the Huffington Post. Sorry.
Yeah. So that was modeled on National Review Online. I didn't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and especially like the corner, which was one of the great features of National Review Online, almost a precursor of Twitter, maybe a prehistoric Twitter. But yeah, NRO, that's what it used to be called. Now it was truly. It was a trendsetter. It was unique, and it was a heady thing for quite a while.
So what's happened, of course, is that obviously, as we all know, website traffic, the amount of eyeballs on a site like NRO dwarf the number of eyeballs that ever see National Review in print. It's the same across any magazine, website-driven organization you can name. Should we care about that? I wanted to ask you whether, should we care about that? Is there anything to be said, or is it just good?
First of all, it's wonderful that there is a website that what National Review and its writers are advocating, or articulating, are reaching millions of people. Whereas, the old model for a magazine was, well, you have your actual circulation, and then you say, well, 3 people are going to read the magazine. I mean, everybody used that kind of. So, okay, 450,000, 500,000 people see National Review versus in 1 month, 8 million or 10 million people seeing it via the website. That said, Jeremy, human nature is human nature. And as someone who's written for National Review and written probably 98% of the content I've written has been for the website. When I write a piece and it's published in the magazine, and for example, 3 years ago, the only time I've ever written a cover piece was about Mark Janus, the great fighter of hostile government employee unions, and the Janus case. That was just so important. There's something about the magazine that's prestigious, as opposed to it doesn't mean that prestigious and intelligent and great copy doesn't appear on our website or anyone's website. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing to see it in a tangible thing. I can hold this, I can show it, I can give it to my kid, I could get 10 extra copies and keep them for my progeny. You can see what Grandpa did back in the day. So, and actually, when NRO started, Bill Buckley's mind was like, well, first of all, his mindset was a little like, if it wasn't worthy to be published in the magazine, it shouldn't be published at all under our brand name. But there was always a little bit of second-handedness. As time goes on, the reality and the ways of things, people write stuff for the magazine and they're like, well, I need the link. Well, it's on paper and ink. There's no link there. So the realities of wanting to share your writing in a magazine just gave way to the realities of a website.
One wonders from the perspective of civil society, of being in perhaps the sort of subtopic under that large topic of civil dialogue, whether there wasn't something to be said for things being difficult to share. Maybe that's a feature, not a bug, in a sense of keeping cooling down conversations. Print is a cooler medium than the hot medium of websites and social media. You wonder whether the overheated nature of our discussions we have today is related to the fact that they take place digitally rather than through.
Yeah. Also, this is a big rat's nest here, but if you're a writer who's an employee of National Review or any magazine, and you're just pulled to be an immediate pontificator, and you can't do that necessarily through NR. Let's say I write it, it's going to take a few hours. The editor's got to edit it before it gets uploaded. The guy might be out to lunch. Who knows what the hell happened? But, geez, I can put it up on this on Twitter in immediately. So the social media becomes a draw from your own writers, given its immediacy. But I want to say something on the civil society front, and this was something that I think has been lost on us, a loss for me as someone who tried to promote a certain idea. I mean, this could be a podcast about the failures of Jack Fowler, but one of them was that NR was such a consequential brand that we became sort of we're hermetical. I like hermetically sealed. And I don't want to say aloof to the rest of the movement, but once, it may have been 15 years ago, I went to some dinner in New York City and I met Tracy Sharp, who happens to be the head of, I think it was 15 years ago, but she's head of State Policy Network. And I'm the publisher of National Review at the time. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I never heard of State Policy Network. What the hell is this thing? I was humiliated of my own ignorance and an aloofness to subsidiarity. This is part of what civil society is about. I mean, not everything is about what the House Majority Leader said to the. So I had thought that maybe a good thing would be is if, whereas a magazine is finite, acreage, you can just print so much an issue. The website is kind of you could print for forever and a day there. I had thought it would be a good thing for National Review to try and have at least a section on what's happening in the states. It certainly would be, I have to admit, it would be boring to the masses, and to a typical reader who came to National Review wouldn't really give a rat's patoot about what the Montana, whatever the heck institute was doing. However, the folks at the Montana, whatever the heck institute would care. Right. And that we could be a platform for some of these good things. We can't talk about subsidiarity as a conservative virtue and then have difficulty in practicing it, right? So I thought this would be a way to promote ideas and the fights and things going on a state level, of course, and then in turn they take that. Our readers who are from Montana might see that and say, well, that's great. Hey, they care about what's happening in my backyard. I think I'm going to send a check. Or it actually benefits the institutions whose work we were promoting. I did that on an ad hoc basis, and it always was a very worthwhile thing for the other institution. But I'd like to see not only National Review, but other entities try to take that on. Again, we're caught, as we mentioned before, we're caught up by today's headlines. Everybody's going to talk about Afghanistan.
There's a centralizing logic at play somehow inherent, in the technology that we're using. It doesn't lend itself to sort of local conversations, it seems, except perhaps in certain sort of social media apps like a Nextdoor or something like that. But then those tend to degenerate very quickly, not into conversations, but into arguments. So talk about, I promised something in the lead-in, the intro, that I want to make sure we touch on. Again, I don't know what you have to say about this, but you're running a business. You're the publisher of National Review. You're running a business. But it's a business that by its nature involves creative people
right.
being part of it, who are not often known for their business sensitivities or acumen. How do you? What kind of challenges did you encounter in managing, editors and writers, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I'll say this for NR. There's a give and take here. First of all, anyone who's working here, National Review, and I say here, even though I used to work at National Review, as you know, I actually work for this great organization called American Philanthropic. I'm still a contributing editor. But we come into a 50, 60-year tradition of fundraising and some development. There's a difference between the two. So when you're hired and you say, National Review does these things, it does. This is NR Inc., not the institute. There's a National Review Institute that's a not-for-profit, but the NR Inc., the magazine and the website, they do regular fundraisers, and we're expected to pitch in. I have to say, I've never, and I oversaw that, I never experienced once any of my editorial colleagues saying, I don't do that. They may say, I don't wash the coffee cups. I had enough of that. But they all pitched in, all as good writers, actually were pretty good at making a case for supporting National Review. So that was to all of them. I owed a great debt because, you just can't. First of all, if you're Jack Fowler on National Review's website, they don't know who the hell Jack Fowler is. They know who Rich Lowry is. They know who Victor James Hansen is. So having those names participate was important. Now, longer term, the issue is that things have changed, Jeremy. I don't know if you heard about this guy, Donald Trump. The dynamic.
Yeah.
It's funny, a cruise that National Review took in, let's say, 2010, where I could not wait to come on that cruise. Please make sure I have dinner with Mitt Romney one of the nights he's there, or Pat Toomey, or half the people who 10 years ago were heroes would, if they were on a cruise today, would be thrown into the propellers by the same people that had adored them a decade ago. So
Right.
These dynamics do affect fundraising. There's no question about it. And the writer who was asking you for help, well, he may have written a piece that did not genuflect to Donald Trump, or did genuflect to Donald Trump. And this kind of hardening of political side taking has affected National Review. It is a magazine that's largely considered a political magazine. It should be no surprise that has affected things. So,
yeah, and it's there's no getting around the fact that if you're publishing a magazine like that today, that fundraising, philanthropy, again, unless you have a billionaire benefactor who's just putting up the whole shebang, it's got to be part of it. In fact, you're going to be stronger if it's based on thousands of donors rather than the one mercurial billionaire who's funding you, as we've seen.
Right. I was involved on the board of one such organization. Guess what? Billionaires get tired of losing $5 million a year, and then the plug is pulled. So that's been a great virtue, a benefit National Review has had, is broad base of support. And surprisingly, despite what I just said of sort of black or white, there are a significant amount of people who still who appreciate hearing from both sides or all voices, or okay, I like reading so and so, even though I might disagree with him, because you know what, he's a terrific writer, and I think that's a hallmark of all the writers at NR, and I think other magazines involved, American Conservative. There's great writing talent there, and that's got some sort of an appeal to a lot of people still, thankfully.
If you were, I guess we would call National Review a media organization. You say it's a magazine and website, but there are other things it does too, podcasts among them. If you were starting a media organization today, didn't want to dealt seriously with ideas, so it was going to have to be cemented. It wasn't going to be advertising and subscriptions that support this thing.
Right.
Would you make it a for-profit entity or a nonprofit entity?
I'd definitely make it a nonprofit. Quickly, I mean, NR did consider at some point, we realize the costs of maintaining this empire. were outpacing even our own fundraising needs. And you fundraise, lots of people will give you $100. There are very few people going to give you, actually, there's nobody who's going to give a for-profit entity $50,000. So it's kind of baked in the cake that there's limitations for-profit to raise money that way outside of, other things, cruises, book publishing, et cetera. Good luck with all that. So I would, we did consider going not-for-profit totally, but you can't do that and be a publication that makes endorsements or even attacks potential candidates. There's this terrible gray area. If you were, though, an entity that wanted to start, as you say, thoughtful commentary, let's just say I want to start a website and a media operation with podcasts, et cetera, about civil society, absolutely, it has to be not-for-profit. The laws allow for that, and the need to raise capital will initially have to come from a few people giving significant support, and it's really only going to happen via that tax status.
So print magazines were supposed to be dead by now,
right?
Along with movie theaters and a few other things that have survived against all odds. Combustion engine, perhaps, among them. What is there a future for print, though? Is it just we're still on a death watch? It's just taking longer than people expected, or will print stick around in the periodical world in particular?
My view is I have a prejudice. I want it to stick around. I think it will. Much narrower. I talked about me being a commuter, and for years, you get off the train at night, and the car was littered with newspapers and magazines, and now there's not a single thing. Everything is digital. But there are people who like to take a thing and sit down with a cup of coffee on a Sunday morning and hold it and read it. So I think it's narrow. I think it's only going to those things are only going to survive if they're part of a larger enterprise, or again, if they're entities supported and or owned by someone of great financial means. But the tangibility is a thing that I don't think will go away. And any number of publications out there today, I mean, I personally yearn for them. I love, the American Conservative. When that comes in the mail, it's a thing. Oh, good, I have it. Claremont Review of Books, The Spectator. So there's a lot of good. City Journal, by the way, of Manhattan Institute. Oh gosh, what a phenomenal publication. So, look, if you're publishing great stuff, people will want it. And it's easier to read a 5,000 word article while you're holding it in your hand rather than on a screen. I think that's never going to go away.
There's no question. It is a superior technology when it comes to things like that. So you spoke about a number of periodicals there, and of course you're still involved with National Review. Let's pivot back to civil society just for a second. What are some of the best ideas you have seen, or your own ideas recently, about how to protect, revive civil society, this intermediate realm between the state and the individual that certainly we're concerned about here on this podcast? But have you seen some things that you've squirreled away and said, yeah, that's a great idea?
Well, as an idea of the X Institute sitting down and coming up with a policy or a plan, a little, not really, but I'm not saying that's not the case, but to me, American civil society is so intrinsically part of our founding and part of we'll take Lincoln's description of America as the last great hope of Earth, that the attacks on our founding, the attacks on the essence of America, have been harmful to civil society. And that's why, like, some of the pushback that we've seen, like Robert Woodson or our mutual friend Dan Mahoney, who's involved with the Real Clear Foundation and other efforts to make intellectual counterattacks. Bill McClay, Defense of American History. I think and promoting this. Now, even though they're not getting drudge level traffic, I think doing that is inspiring and important. Look, I'm a layman, Jeremy, and I come late to the intellectual game, but it's clear that civil society and the right of association, which was upheld, thankfully, a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court issued a very, very important decision in Americans for Prosperity v. Bonta. But the associative right is really the central thing to protect America in its essence from becoming a tyranny. That's what governments, even democracies, they want to aggrandize, and civil society is the countermeasure to that. So I believe strongly that we are at a point where there needs to be a real re-education, although that sounds very Maoist, but there needs to be a reinvigoration of the knowledge and the essence of civil society. So some of these pushback projects are excellent in that regard, but I hope they lead to greater things. And here, here, you and I, American Philanthropic, I think that's one of the things we want to undertake, is to resensitize people who are trying to make America great, that just how important civil society is to our history, to our greatness, and to our future, and to our flourishing. We're not going to flourish unless we have an active and unrepressed civil society in America.
That's certainly one of the premises upon which we are building our lives. I think that's true. And you mentioned the associative right. It's in its centrality to a healthy civil society. That's a point that Christopher Caldwell makes at length in his book, The Age of Entitlement. And we hopefully will be having Christopher on the podcast here in the next few weeks. So I'm talking to Jack on August 18th, 2021. I like to put that out there so people know when the heck we were having this conversation. So you mentioned what we're trying to do here. And so, yes, you already dropped the news in case people don't. You are now my colleague at American Philanthropic. And we're obviously super happy to have you. And we've started this thing called the Center for Civil Society, which is just getting off the ground. What are we trying to do with that? You tell me.
Yeah, I wish I knew. So it's a joke I have, Jack Fowler and civil society. Those two words in the same sentence.
You're the director of the Center for Civil Society. No, really, we have great hopes for it. Yeah, I'm honored to be a part of American Philanthropic, and not to, as they say, blow smoke, but when I was running National Review, American Philanthropic was of critical help to NR to realize how to grow, how to meet with donors and supporters and make our message clear, and to bring people in. And it's just been a tremendous help, not only to us and to many other organizations. So to be part of this group of this band of brothers and sisters is a wonderful thing. So the one of the goals to me of the Center for Civil Society is again to re-educate. Givers. I mean, who's involved in this? It's in trying to enhance. It's givers, doers, thinkers. The people who give, the people who are at the nonprofits who have the mission and are trying to enact programs and policies, and the thinkers are scholars, others who articulate a mission, a mission. So improving their effectiveness, but I think also trying to take, I'm not going to say conservative liberal, but people who have a love for civil society, and remind them of, maybe, especially if you're a donor, that local matters. It's this desire to send $5 million to some national organization. Well, if that floats your boat, fine. I mean, it's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. But
your support locally is really critical. So trying to remind people of that. And I do think many donors need to be reminded of that, right? And to strike some proper balance and have an affection and understanding of why localism is important. That is one of the objectives of this center. And that happens through various means, through podcasts, through conferences, through advocacy, and through meeting with all the players in this game. Again, people who give, people who do, and people who think. So I'm kind of honored to be here. It is gelling. So
that's good though. It's well put. That's the first time we've tried to publicly, if we can call this publicly, articulate what we're trying to accomplish. And I think I love the emphasis on the local. Obviously, where civil society happens is intrinsically local. It is intrinsically within a community of people. And striking a balance is the right way to put it, I think, Jack, in one's giving and one's attention between sort of, we're always drawn to the national, the international, the global, and away from the local. So it's
yeah, Jeremy. One other thing is also like the obsession many people have, and I know a lot of them, good people involved with NR and others who are just so metric based, and we need to the ruler doesn't apply to everything, and in many cases, the whole obsession with measurement is counterproductive to our for me, I assume for you too, our kind of moral obligation to be charitable, right? It doesn't, measurement matters and it helps, it's great, but I think to offset the obsession with that is one of the other tasks ahead.
Very good. Agreed. Jack Fowler, thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's great to be with you.
Jack is the former publisher of National Review, director of the Center for Civil Society, and it was great talking to you. Take care.
Thanks, my friend. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for joining us today for this podcast. Before I let you go, I wanted to let you know about a special fundraising survey that American Philanthropic and the Center for Civil Society have just launched. And we would love it if you and your organization would participate. If you are a nonprofit organization that raises money, you qualify for participating in the survey, and we would love to have you be a part of it. How does it help you? Well, it's very, very hard to find good benchmarking data out there in the world to help you know how you're doing in your fundraising program. Are you underperforming here? Are you overperforming there? This survey will give you those answers. So we would love to have you participate. You can participate just by going to AmericanPhilanthropic.com and clicking on survey in the toolbar. And if you do participate, there's some cool things that happen. First of all, you get a free digital copy of the report, the final report that we produce that includes all the data, and that will be very useful to you in your fundraising planning, management, strategy, all that kind of stuff. You also get a free 30-minute consultation with one of our consultants to discuss your results and just kind of talk you through what we're seeing in your results and how they compare to your peers. And then there's all sorts of other stuff. You get a $100 gift card for the first 10 organizations to complete the survey. You get entered into a drawing for a $500 gift card. You get a chance to win a seat at one of AmPhil fundraising trainings, which is like a $3,000 value. So that's pretty cool. So, hey, if you are a leader of a nonprofit, a development officer, a board member, we would love for you to participate. Just go to AmericanPhilanthropic.com, click on survey. It's a very meaty survey, and that's intentional because we get really great data and answers out of it for us to share with organizations like yours. So thank you very much for considering this, and we hope to have you in this survey. Thanks a lot.